I am Cheryl Wilson, 58 years old, and for decades I built my consulting business from nothing into something I was proud of. My husband Victor and I had what I thought was a rock-solid marriage of 23 years, celebrating every milestone at our Cape Cod vacation home. Something always felt off about his new assistant, Catherine, but nothing prepared me for what would happen at our annual family dinner. That night changed everything. If you are watching this, let me know where you are from in the comments below, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about standing your ground when life throws its worst at you. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Chicago, the daughter of a teacher and a factory worker who taught me the value of hard work and education. Unlike many of my peers who married young, I focused on building my career in business consulting. My first marriage in my 20s failed miserably when my ex-husband gambled away our savings and left me with nothing but debt. That experience made me cautious and pragmatic about money and relationships. By my 30s, I had rebuilt my life, paid off the debt, and started my own consulting business, helping small companies streamline their operations. I met Victor at a charity gala where I was representing one of my clients. He was 40, successful, handsome, and carried himself with the confidence that comes from privilege and achievement. As a partner at one of Boston's prestigious law firms, specializing in corporate law, Victor had wealth, connections, and charm that drew people to him. Our romance was swift and intense. Within 6 months, he proposed with a 3-carat diamond ring during a weekend trip to Martha's Vineyard. My friends were concerned about how quickly we were moving, especially given his reputation as somewhat of a ladies' man before we met. Susan, my closest friend since college, pulled me aside at my engagement party. "You know I want you to be happy, Cheryl, but are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice low. "I have heard things about Victor from people at his firm. He has quite a history with women. I appreciate your concern," I told her, squeezing her hand, "but people change. He has been nothing but devoted to me. Besides, I'm going into this with my eyes wide open." And I was. When Victor brought up the topic of a prenuptial agreement to protect his family assets, I surprised him by not only agreeing, but insisting on several additional clauses of my own. I had learned from my first marriage that love needed practical protections. "I want specific infidelity clauses," I told Victor as we sat in his attorney's office, "particularly regarding children fathered outside our marriage." Victor laughed at this. "Darling, you do not need to worry about that. Those days are behind me." His attorney looked uncomfortable, but took notes as I outlined exactly what I wanted. Victor signed without reading the details, assuming it was all standard language. That carelessness would matter years later. We married in a lavish ceremony on the Boston Harbor, bought a beautiful brownstone in Beacon Hill, and settled into our life together. Over the next few years, we had our children James and Amelia, who became the center of our world. Victor continued climbing the ranks at his law firm, eventually becoming managing partner, while I expanded my consulting business to serve larger corporate clients across New England. Our life looked perfect from the outside. We hosted dinner parties for Victor's colleagues, attended charity events, and spent summers at our vacation home in Cape Cod. The children attended private schools and then prestigious universities. Victor and I traveled extensively when our schedules allowed, collecting art and memories. We had separate bank accounts, as well as joint ones, maintaining some financial independence while building our shared life. For most of our 23 years together, we were partners in the true sense of the word. He supported my ambitions, and I was his biggest cheerleader. We had our arguments, of course, but we always seemed to find our way back to each other. Or so I thought. 6 months ago, I began noticing subtle changes in Victor. At 60, he suddenly became obsessed with his appearance in a way that felt different from his usual professional polish. He joined a new gym with personal training sessions 3 times a week. His wardrobe expanded to include more youthful styles. He started using a new cologne, something heavier and more intense than the subtle scent he had worn for years. Most concerning were the late-night work calls that required privacy, the new password on his phone, and the way he angled his laptop screen away when I entered his home office. When I asked casual questions about his day or his cases, his answers became vague and irritated. Around this time, Victor mentioned hiring a new legal assistant, Catherine Mills, 29, fresh out of paralegal training, with exceptional organizational skills, according to my husband. She would be helping him with a major class action lawsuit that required extensive document preparation. She is a godsend, Cheryl, he told me over dinner one evening. I have not had an assistant this competent in years. That was the first time I heard Catherine's name, but it certainly would not be the last. The first time I met Catherine was at the law firm's holiday party 3 months after she was hired. Victor had mentioned her so frequently that I was curious to put a face to the name. When we entered the elegantly decorated ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton, my eyes immediately found her in the crowd, though I had never seen her before. Call it woman's intuition. She was standing near the bar laughing with a group of younger associates. Tall and slender with glossy dark hair, wearing a form-fitting red dress that stood out among the sea of conservative black attire. When she saw Victor, her entire face lit up in a way that sent alarm bells ringing in my mind. Victor steered me toward her with his hand on the small of my back. Catherine, I would like you to meet my wife, Cheryl. Her handshake was firm, her smile perfect. Mrs. Wilson, I have heard so much about you. Victor talks about you constantly. The words were right, but something in her tone felt performative, like an actress reciting lines. Throughout the evening, I noticed her eyes following Victor across the room. When we were seated for dinner, she somehow ended up at our table directly across from my husband. Their conversation flowed with inside jokes and references to cases and clients, effectively creating a bubble that excluded everyone else. When I mentioned my observations to Victor on the drive home, he dismissed my concerns entirely. Do not be ridiculous, Cheryl. She is an employee and a valuable one. If you are implying something inappropriate that is beneath you. His defensive tone only heightened my suspicions. Over the next few months, Catherine's name dominated our conversations. Victor regularly cited her ideas, her work ethic, her insights. When I called his office, she was always the one to answer, her voice cool and professional, as she explained that Victor was in a meeting at court or on another line. Victor started attending more work events, client dinners, and preparation sessions that ran late into the evening. When he came home, he was distant, checking his phone constantly and smiling at messages that apparently could not be shared. My friends noticed the changes too. During our monthly lunch, Susan asked directly, "Is everything okay with you and Victor? You seem tense when you talk about him lately." I confided my concerns about Catherine and the changes in Victor's behavior. Susan, who had been through her own husband's midlife crisis affair, recognized the signs immediately. Trust your gut, Cheryl. This sounds like textbook behavior. Have you checked his phone email? I had not, partly from respect for his privacy and partly from fear of what I might find. But that night when Victor fell asleep after claiming exhaustion from work, I did something I had never done before. I checked his phone. The text messages between him and Catherine went well beyond professional boundaries. Nothing explicitly romantic, but filled with late-night check-ins, personal comments, and plans to meet outside of work hours. When I confronted Victor the next morning, he had an explanation ready. "We are working on the Sullivan case. It is all hands on deck, and Catherine is my right hand on this. Of course we text about work matters, but it is 11 at night, Victor. And why does she need to know what you are having for lunch or what tie you are wearing to court? You are reading too much into this, Cheryl. This is why I did not want to tell you about the long hours. I knew you would make it into something it is not." His deflection made me even more suspicious. The next week, I decided to surprise Victor at his office with lunch. The receptionist informed me he was out at a meeting but should return soon. As I waited in the lobby, Catherine emerged from the elevator looking surprised to see me. "Mrs. Wilson, Victor is at a deposition today. Did you have an appointment?" "That is strange," I replied calmly. The receptionist said he would be back from a meeting soon. Catherine's composure flickered for just a moment. Oh, she must be confused. It is a deposition that could end early. "I can let him know you stopped by." I thanked her and left, but not before noticing how she immediately pulled out her phone, presumably to warn Victor about our encounter. The contradicting information confirmed what my intuition had been telling me for months. Using my business connections, I discreetly looked into Catherine's background. She had worked at 2 law firms before joining Victor, staying less than a year at each. One of my contacts who knew someone at her previous employer mentioned rumors about her close relationship with a senior partner there, which ended around the time of her departure. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture I did not want to see but could no longer ignore. My husband was at minimum engaged in an emotional affair with his young assistant. The question was how far it had gone and what I was going to do about it. The emotional toll was tremendous. At 58, I found myself comparing my body to that of a 29-year-old woman. I questioned every aspect of my marriage, wondering if Victor had ever been faithful or if I had been blind to his true nature all along. I vacillated between burning anger and crushing sadness, sometimes waking up at night to find tears streaming down my face. But beneath these emotions was a steely resolve that had seen me through previous hardships. I would not be made a fool of. I would not simply accept betrayal. And most importantly, I would not let either Victor or Catherine dictate the terms of what happened next. Despite the tension building in our marriage, I insisted on maintaining our annual family dinner tradition at our Cape Cod home. For over 20 years, we had gathered there in early summer to celebrate the beginning of the season and reconnect as a family. As the children grew older and busier with their own lives, these traditions became even more important to me. When I mentioned the dinner to Victor in May, he immediately tried to postpone it. "I am swamped with the Sullivan case right now, Cheryl. Can we push it to August?" The Sullivan case, again his perpetual excuse. "No, we cannot. James already arranged time off from his internship, and Amelia is flying in from Chicago. The dinner is happening the second weekend of June, as always." Victor knew the determined tone in my voice and did not argue further, though his displeasure was evident in the tight set of his jaw. As the date approached, he became increasingly agitated, suggesting we move the dinner to a restaurant or hire caterers instead of my usual home cooking. "I have too much to do to help with preparations this year," he said. "You have never helped with preparations before, Victor," I reminded him. "This will be no different." In truth, I found solace in the familiar routine of planning this dinner. I selected recipes, ordered groceries, and prepared what I could in advance. The act of creating something beautiful and meaningful gave me purpose during a time when so much felt uncertain and painful. James arrived first, driving up from Boston, where he was interning at a tech startup while finishing his senior year of college. At 22, he was the image of his father at that age, with the same strong jawline and confident posture, though his temperament was more thoughtful and reserved. I watched him carry his weekend bag to his childhood bedroom, noticing how adult he looked now. The realization that my children were grown and establishing their own lives hit me with unexpected force. If my marriage was ending this phase of my life, my identity as part of a nuclear family was ending too. Later that afternoon, while Victor was on a work call in his study, James joined me in the kitchen as I prepared homemade pasta for the next day's dinner. "How are things with you and Dad?" he asked, trying to sound casual as he stole a cherry tomato from the salad ingredients. The directness of the question surprised me. "What makes you ask that?" He shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "You two seem different, tense." And I saw him having lunch with his assistant last month at that French place near his office. They looked pretty friendly. My hands stilled on the pasta dough. "Did your father see you?" "No, I do not think so. They were in a corner booth and I was picking up takeout. Mom is something going on. I wanted to protect him from the mess that was unfolding, but I also would not lie to my son. Your father and I are going through some challenges right now. I am handling it." Before James could respond, we heard Amelia's car in the driveway. At 25, my daughter was building her career as a marketing executive in Chicago. Fiercely independent and perceptive, she had always been my confidant. The reunion was joyful, filled with hugs and updates about her job and new apartment. Victor emerged from his study to greet her, and for a brief time the house felt normal again as we all caught up over drinks on the deck overlooking the water. That evening, after Victor returned to another work call, Amelia cornered me in the laundry room where I was putting fresh towels for everyone's bathrooms. "What is going on with you and Dad?" she demanded without preamble. "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" I attempted a light tone. "Because we have eyes, Mom. And because Dad's assistant Catherine reached out to me on Instagram 3 months ago." This stopped me cold. "What? Why would she contact you?" Amelia pulled out her phone and showed me the message thread. Catherine had introduced herself as Victor's new assistant, saying she wanted to connect with his family since they worked so closely together. The messages seemed friendly and innocuous on the surface, but the fact that she had sought out my daughter felt like a violation. "I thought it was weird," Amelia said, "but Dad always had young assistants trying to network." Then she started asking questions about you and Dad, about our family traditions, even about this house. That is when I stopped responding. The calculated nature of Catherine's actions made my blood run cold. This was not just an affair. This was someone systematically inserting herself into our family. That night, I could not sleep. While Victor snored beside me, I slipped out of bed and made a phone call to an old friend who had become one of Boston's top divorce attorneys. We arranged to meet the following day while Victor thought I was grocery shopping for the dinner. Laura's office was warm and inviting, designed to put anxious clients at ease. She hugged me tightly before leading me to her desk. "I brought my prenuptial agreement," I said, pulling the document from my bag. "I need to know exactly where I stand." She reviewed it carefully, her expression growing increasingly impressed as she turned the pages. "This is one of the most thorough prenups I have seen, especially from this era. The infidelity clauses are particularly strong." "You were quite forward-thinking, Cheryl." Victor's family insisted on a prenup, but these clauses were my additions, I explained. "After my first marriage, I wanted protection." Laura turned to a specific section and pointed. "This clause is especially interesting. In the event of infidelity resulting in a child fathered outside the marriage, you would receive 75% of all assets, plus sole ownership of both properties." It is very specific and quite enforceable given how clearly it is worded. I sat back, a strange calm washing over me. I had forgotten the exact percentage specified in that clause written so many years ago as protection against a fear that had seemed remote at the time. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of control returning. I now had information and a plan, which was all I had ever needed to face life's challenges. With careful instructions from Laura about gathering evidence and protecting my interests, I returned to the house to finish preparations for the dinner that would change everything. Saturday evening arrived with perfect early summer weather. The dining room in our Cape Cod home overlooked the ocean, and I had set the table with our best china, crystal, and silver. Fresh flowers from the garden created a centerpiece, and candles waited to be lit. The scene was picture perfect, just as it had been for more than 2 decades of family dinners. James helped me in the kitchen, while Amelia set up a playlist of our favorite songs. Victor, freshly showered and dressed in a blue button-down that matched his eyes, paced the living room, checking his phone every few minutes. "You are expecting a work call on a Saturday night?" I asked, my tone conversational despite the tension I felt. "Just checking in on the Sullivan case," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. At 6:30, just as I was placing the antipasto platter on the table, the doorbell rang. Victor froze, his face draining of color. None of us were expecting anyone. "I will get it," James offered, heading to the front door. From the dining room, I heard a female voice, then James's confused response. Moments later, he returned with Catherine following behind him. She was dressed in a pale blue sundress that emphasized her youth and the subtle curves of her body. Her dark hair was loose around her shoulders, and she carried a bottle of expensive champagne. The expression on her face when she saw me was a mixture of challenge and triumph, barely concealed beneath a veneer of politeness. "Catherine says she has documents for Dad," James explained, clearly uncomfortable with the intrusion. Victor stepped forward, his movements stiff. "Catherine, I was not expecting you. I thought we agreed to handle this on Monday. Her laugh was light and practiced. I know, but since I was in the area visiting my aunt in Hyannis, I thought I would drop these by. She held up a manila folder that I suspected contained nothing urgent. The timing seemed too perfect for me to tell you my news. Victor's expression was panicked now as he glanced between Catherine and me. This really is not a good time. We are having a family dinner. Oh, I'm so sorry to interrupt, Catherine said, not sounding sorry at all. She turned to me with a practiced smile. Mrs. Wilson, I hope you do not mind. I promise I will only take a minute of your time. Every instinct told me to show her the door, but strategic thinking prevailed. Actually, Catherine, since you are here, why do not you join us for dinner? We have plenty. Victor looked horrified, but Catherine's face lit up with genuine surprise before she composed herself. Are you sure I would not want to impose? I insist, I said, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through me. Any friend of Victor's is welcome at our table. Amelia shot me a questioning look, but I gave a subtle nod to reassure her I knew what I was doing. James pulled out an extra chair and place setting while I retrieved another wine glass from the cabinet. As we settled around the table, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Victor sat rigid in his chair, barely touching the food I placed before him. Catherine, however, made herself immediately at home, complimenting the house, the view, and my cooking with excessive enthusiasm. This house is just gorgeous, Mrs. Wilson. Victor has told me so much about your summers here, she gushed, her eyes moving possessively over the space, as if already imagining herself as its mistress. Thank you, I replied. We have made many memories here over the 23 years of our marriage. Throughout the first course, Catherine dominated the conversation, sharing stories about cases she had worked on, with Victor dropping casual references to late nights at the office and weekend work sessions. She addressed my children with a familiarity that made Amelia's jaw tighten and caused James to stare intently at his plate. James, Victor mentioned you are interning at Technova this summer. I actually know their legal counsel quite well. I could put in a good word if you are interested in that department, she offered. I am in software development, not legal, but thanks, James responded coolly. As I served the main course, my homemade gnocchi with summer vegetables, I noticed Victor's hand briefly touch Catherine's under the table. The gesture was subtle but unmistakable, and from Amelia's sharp intake of breath, I knew she had seen it too. Catherine took a small bite of pasta, made an appreciative noise, then put her fork down. Before I can enjoy any more of this delicious meal, I actually have an announcement to make. That is the real reason I wanted to stop by today. Victor's head snapped up, his expression a mixture of confusion and alarm. Catherine, this is not the place. She ignored him, pushing back her chair to stand at the table. Her posture was triumphant as she placed one hand lightly on her stomach, which I now noticed showed the slightest curve beneath her fitted dress. I am pregnant, she announced, her eyes fixed directly on mine, waiting for my reaction. 3 months along. The room went completely silent. James and Amelia both turned to look at their father, whose face had gone ashen. Victor and I are having a baby, Catherine continued into the silence, her voice honeyed with false sympathy. We did not plan for it to happen this way, and I know this must be a shock for all of you. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap. Though my heart was pounding and nausea rose in my throat, years of business negotiations had taught me to never reveal weakness in a critical moment. Victor finally found his voice. Catherine, I told you we needed to handle this differently. I was going to talk to Cheryl privately. When Catherine asked with a hint of steel in her voice, You have been saying that for weeks now. She turned back to me, her expression softening in what I recognized as practiced manipulation. I truly am sorry you had to find out this way, Mrs. Wilson. But Victor and I are in love, and this baby deserves to have its parents together. Victor reached for her hand openly now, though whether from affection or to stop her from speaking further, I could not tell. Either way, the gesture confirmed everything. I should have told you, Cheryl, Victor said, finally addressing me. It was not supposed to happen like this. That is your response. Amelia interjected, her voice shaking with anger. You get your assistant pregnant, and all you can say is it was not supposed to happen like this. Catherine smiled at my daughter with the manufactured patience. I know this is difficult to accept, but your father and I have genuine feelings for each other. This is not some cliché office affair. How long has this been going on? James asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Catherine looked to Victor, who remained silent, then answered herself. We realized our feelings for each other about 7 months ago, but we tried to keep things professional at first. 7 months. While I was planning our anniversary trip, while I was caring for Victor when he had the flu, while I was supporting his career and maintaining our home, he had been building a relationship with this woman. I have already started looking at real estate listings in this area. Catherine continued, gaining confidence from Victor's silence. This would be such a wonderful place for a child to grow up. Though of course we will need to discuss the details of the transition. I understand this is your family home, Mrs. Wilson, but given the circumstances— Her words trailed off, the implication clear. She expected me to vacate my home to surrender my life and make room for her and her child. The entitlement in her assumption was breathtaking. Victor was watching me now, perhaps expecting tears or a scene. Catherine, too, seemed to be waiting for my breakdown, a flicker of anticipation in her eyes. They both believed they had won, that I would crumble under the weight of this public humiliation. Instead, I smiled. If you will excuse me for just a moment, I said, rising from the table with a calm I did not feel. I need to get something from my office. I could feel all eyes on me as I left the dining room, walking steadily down the hallway to the small office I maintained in our vacation home. Inside the wall safe behind a painting of the Boston Harbor, I retrieved a leather document folder I had placed there earlier that day. When I returned to the dining room, Catherine was discussing nursery colors with a shell-shocked Victor. I am thinking a nautical theme, something classic, she was saying. This room across from the master would be perfect. It gets such beautiful morning light. I set the leather folder down on the table with a soft thud. Actually, Catherine, I think your decorating plans may be a bit premature. She gave me a condescending smile. I understand this is a shock, Mrs. Wilson, but we are trying to be practical about the situation. So am I replied, opening the folder. In fact, I have been practical about this situation for approximately 23 years. I removed the prenuptial agreement, turning to the page my lawyer had flagged for me. The document was thick, printed on heavy legal paper, with signatures and notary seals on the final page. Victor, do you remember when we created our prenuptial agreement? I asked, my voice even. You were so concerned about protecting your family's assets, but you left the actual details to the lawyers. You barely read it before signing. Victor shifted uncomfortably in his chair. That was a long time ago, Cheryl. I doubt it is relevant now. On the contrary, I think you will find it extremely relevant. I have known about your affair for some time now, I revealed, watching Catherine's smug expression falter. In fact, I hired a private investigator 3 months ago who has thoroughly documented your relationship. I turned to Catherine. Hotel receipts, photographs, text message records, all very conclusive and all very admissible. Victor's face had gone from ashen to red. You had me followed. That is an invasion of privacy, no more invasive than bringing your pregnant mistress to our family dinner, I countered. But let me get to the point. I began reading directly from the document. In the event that the husband fathers a child outside of the marriage, the wife shall receive 75% of all assets acquired during the marriage, as well as sole ownership of both the primary residence and vacation property. The color drained from Victor's face as recognition dawned. Catherine looked between us, confusion replacing her earlier confidence. That is ridiculous, Victor sputtered. No court would uphold that. Actually, I spoke with Laura Greenfield yesterday, I said, referring to the prominent divorce attorney. She assures me this clause is ironclad, especially given the clear evidence of paternity you have both just provided. Laura Greenfield. Victor repeated, his voice hollow. She is the best divorce attorney in Boston. Yes, and now she represents me, which means she cannot represent you due to conflict of interest. I continued calmly. I also consulted with Richard Bennett and Maria Jimenez, so they are also unavailable to you. I believe they are considered the top 3 divorce attorneys in Massachusetts. Amelia let out a small sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. James was staring at me with something like awe. Catherine's hand had fallen from her stomach, and her earlier confidence had completely evaporated. "This cannot be legal," she insisted. "Victor, tell her this would never hold up." Victor was staring at the prenuptial agreement as if it were a venomous snake. I had forgotten about that specific clause. He admitted, his voice barely audible. I turned to Catherine. "So you see, there will be no nursery in this house for your child. In fact, given the financial realities Victor is about to face, I doubt there will be waterfront property in your future at all." Catherine stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "This is not over," she hissed, grabbing her purse. "We will fight this." I simply slid another document across the table. "These are copies of the hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and some particularly interesting text messages the investigator recovered. Feel free to show them to whatever second-tier attorney will take your case." Catherine stared at the evidence, her composure finally breaking completely. Tears welled in her eyes as she turned to Victor. "Do something." Victor stood, running a hand through his silver hair in a gesture of helplessness I had seen countless times over our marriage. "Catherine, we should go. We need to discuss this privately." As they moved toward the door, Victor paused to look back at me. "Cheryl, I never meant to hurt you. This got out of hand." I met his gaze steadily. 23 years, Victor. That is what you threw away. Now please leave my house." After the front door closed behind them, silence descended on the dining room. The gnocchi had gone cold, the candles burned low. James was the first to speak. "Mom, that was the most badass thing I have ever seen." Amelia moved to the chair beside me, taking my hand in hers. "Are you okay?" The calm that had sustained me began to crack, and I felt tears threatening. "No, I am not okay, but I will be." And in that moment, surrounded by my children, I believed it. The weeks following what James now refers to as the dinner from hell were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and emotional reckonings. True to my word, I filed for divorce the very next day, citing the infidelity clause in our prenuptial agreement. Victor initially tried to challenge the prenup, claiming he had not understood the terms when he signed it. But faced with the mountain of evidence I had accumulated and the ironclad wording of the document, his attorneys eventually advised him to settle. Catherine's pregnancy meant there was no denying the grounds for invoking the clause. While the legal machinery ground forward, I allowed myself the emotional release I had been postponing. There were nights I cried until my eyes were swollen, days I could barely get out of bed, and moments of rage so intense I had to drive to the beach and scream into the wind. 23 years of marriage deserved to be mourned regardless of how it ended. The most difficult part was dealing with mutual friends and colleagues who had been part of our shared life. Some took sides immediately. Others tried to remain neutral, and a few attempted to convince me to forgive Victor for the sake of our history together. At a chance encounter at our favorite restaurant, Victor's law partner Michael approached my table. "Cheryl, I know Victor made a terrible mistake, but he is suffering. His judgment was clouded. Perhaps with time you might consider." I cut him off politely but firmly. "Michael, would you stay with a spouse who brought their pregnant lover to your family dinner, who planned to move that person into your home?" He had no answer for that. Catherine proved to be as calculating as I had suspected. When it became clear that Victor would not emerge from the divorce with the wealth she had anticipated, she began to distance herself. According to Amelia, who heard through mutual connections, Catherine had been telling Victor that he had promised to leave me long before the pregnancy, that their child was conceived in love rather than carelessness. 6 months after that fateful dinner, I stood in my new luxury condominium overlooking Boston Harbor. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the water and city skyline in a view that still took my breath away. I had chosen to sell the Beacon Hill home rather than keep it. Too many memories lingered in those rooms. Victor and I had sold the Cape Cod property as part of the settlement, splitting that portion of the proceeds, though I received the lion's share of our other assets. The divorce was finally complete, signed and filed. I was legally, financially, and emotionally independent once again. At 59, I was starting a new chapter. That evening, I hosted a small gathering for the friends who had supported me through the divorce. Susan, who had suspected Victor from the beginning, raised her glass in a toast. To new beginnings, and to the smartest woman I know who protected herself when it mattered most. The healing process had been gradual but steady. I had started seeing a therapist who specialized in helping women rebuild after betrayal. The sessions helped me process not just the end of my marriage, but the signs I had ignored and the patterns I had accepted. I also discovered an unexpected passion. During a support group meeting, I met several women who had been financially devastated by divorces they had not seen coming. Their stories of having to start over with nothing in middle age resonated with my own past and inspired an idea. Using my business experience and the network I had built over decades, I launched a consulting firm specifically focused on helping women secure their financial futures. We offered workshops on prenuptial agreements, investment strategies, and career development for women re-entering the workforce after divorce or widowhood. The venture took off immediately, fulfilling both my need for purpose and my desire to prevent others from experiencing vulnerability during life's most challenging transitions. My relationship with my children deepened through the adversity we had shared. James, now graduated and working at a tech firm, called me weekly for advice on everything from workplace politics to his new relationship. Amelia, who had witnessed Victor's betrayal with particular anger, processed her feelings by helping me design the website and marketing materials for my new business. Perhaps the most unexpected development in my new life was reconnecting with Thomas, a widower who had been a client of my original consulting firm years earlier. We met for coffee to discuss a potential collaboration with my new venture, and our professional rapport quickly evolved into friendship, then cautious romance. At 62, Thomas was kind, honest, and direct in ways that felt refreshing after years of Victor's charm masking his deceptions. He made no grand gestures or sweeping promises, just showed up consistently with thoughtfulness and respect. As for Victor, I heard through mutual friends that he was struggling. The law firm had asked him to step down as managing partner, concerned about the scandal affecting their reputation. His reduced income after the divorce settlement meant significant lifestyle changes. Catherine had moved to New York for a new job, making co-implementing difficult. I took no pleasure in his difficulties, but neither did I feel responsible for them. The consequences he faced were of his own making. 1 year after the divorce, I received a letter from Victor. In careful handwritten pages, he attempted to explain himself, offered genuine apologies, and expressed regret for throwing away our years together. The letter ended with a request to meet for coffee, a tentative reach towards some form of forgiveness. I sat with the letter for several days, considering my response. In the end, I wrote back a short note: Victor, I accept your apology and wish you well in rebuilding your life. The past cannot be undone, but perhaps we can both find peace in what remains. I am not ready for a meeting, but I appreciate your reaching out. Cheryl, forgiveness. I had learned was a gift I gave myself, not him. It allowed me to release the bitterness that might otherwise have colored my new beginning. The woman I had become through this painful transformation was stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more fulfilled than the woman who had built her identity around being Victor Wilson's wife. On a crisp fall evening, as Thomas and I walked along the harbor near my new home, he asked what I had learned from everything I had been through. I thought for a moment, watching the lights reflect on the dark water. I learned that preparation is not pessimism, I told him. Protecting yourself is not the same as expecting the worst. It is simply recognizing that love, while beautiful, is not enough on its own. You need boundaries, self-respect, and the courage to enforce both. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. And what would you tell other women facing similar situations? Trust your instincts, I said without hesitation. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Document everything. Know your financial situation inside and out. And build a prenup that protects your worst-case scenario, even if you never need it. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of the ocean. Thomas put his arm around my shoulders, and I leaned into his warmth, grateful for this unexpected second chance at companionship. Life rarely unfolds as we expect. The path I thought I would walk with Victor for the rest of my days had diverged dramatically. Yet standing there overlooking the harbor, I felt a profound peace with where that new path had led me. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that your worth is not determined by someone else's ability to recognize it. Have you ever had to stand your ground when someone underestimated you? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please like, subscribe, and share this with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, preparing for the worst while hoping for the best is not cynicism. It is wisdom. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other.